In the book Unspeakable Things Unspoken, the Afro-American Presence in American Literature, Toni Morrison calls for the recognition of African-American art as part of the general canon of American art. She communicates this idea first by insisting that Black art has proven time and time again that it has the quality to be considered true art without qualification, and later by asserting that art produced by African-Americans is too diverse to be relegated to a single, closed-off category. Nowhere is Morrison's point more evident than in African-American cinema, which transcends limited expectations of Black creative potential and demonstrates the capacity for Black artists to produce works heavily characterized by their unique racial perspective or completely devoid of stereotypical tropes. Morrison begins her argument with a timeline of artistic prejudices leveled at minority artists over time. From the 17th century to the 20th, the arguments resisting the incursion of Black art have marched in predictable sequence. 1. There is no Afro-American or Third World art. 2. It exists but is inferior. 3. It exists and is superior when it measures up to the universal criteria of Western art. 4. It is not so much art as ore, rich ore, that requires a Western or Eurocentric smith to refine it from its natural state into an aesthetically compelling form. She shows how race-based prejudice of art gets more complex over time as it tries to avoid being as provably false as the previous standards for judging African-American art. However, these standards are knocked down every time and only propped back up and reinforced by the racially adversarial mentality Morrison hints at by calling the advent of Black art an incursion. All four of these prejudice standards can be disproven by the unimpeachably Black films of a single man, the American actor, singer, producer, and godfather of rap, Rudy Ray Moore. Rudy Ray Moore was one of the biggest names in the 1970s blaxploitation genre of films, and along with frequent collaborator Cliff Roquemore, helped define the genre with movies including Disco Godfather and Dolomite. Despite the criticism that blaxploitation films glorify and reinforce negative stereotypes about African Americans, these films, written by, produced by, and starring Black people, represent the first genuine sounding of a purely Black voice in American cinema. The story of P.D. Wheatstraw is influenced by African American folktales that portray the devil as an adversary who can be bargained with and even outwitted by someone with sufficient wit and guile. These tropes trace their roots to traditional African fables, demonstrating that there certainly is Afro-American art, and that the rich ore of African American storytelling does not need a Western or European smith to be transformed into an aesthetically compelling form. The African smith is plenty capable. The success of this film, featuring purely Black comedy, modes of speech,
God damn, mama, this shit was a spooky joint,
and themes, demonstrates the potential of artistic expression that intentionally does not live up to the universal criteria of Western art. Toni Morrison's appeal for Black inclusion in the American literary canon went beyond extolling the virtues of African American writing when she pointed out that it does not go without saying that a work written by an Afro-American is automatically subsumed by an enforcing Afro-American presence. There is a clear flight from Blackness in a great deal of Afro-American literature. In others, there is the duel with Blackness. And in some cases, as they say, you'd never know. Through challenging society's assumption that Blackness will automatically characterize Black art, Morrison demonstrates how relegating the work of all African Americans to a single genre ignores art that actively goes against or entirely ignores racial influence. By reminding us that Black Americans, being as diverse as any group of Americans, can produce art without any sign of their racial identity, she subverts the argument about whether to count Black Americans as great American artists altogether. The portfolio of American writer and director F. Gary Gray clearly shows this spectrum. Although F. Gary Gray is often associated with films like Friday and his music videos for artists like Ice Cube, Outkast, and TLC, his work is highly diversive and frequently devoid of a discernible racial voice. His 2003 film, The Italian Job, demonstrates how even a single artist can sometimes define themselves by an enforcing Afro-American presence, without that presence automatically subsuming all of their work. Despite lacking most of the tropes and Blackness characteristic of earlier Black-directed films, The Italian Job takes inspiration from those movies through its exaggerated action, ostentatious style, and a central theme of overcoming the constraints of an oppressive system. The film was successful not because of or even despite the racial perspective of its director, but entirely irrespective of it. As Morrison said, you'd never know the director was Black from the movie alone, and labeling Gray as simply a director of Black films would be unjustly restricting and disingenuous. Even though Toni Morrison's Unspeakable Things Unspoken was intended to address literary works alone, the advent of black cinema has provided demonstrable evidence of the truth behind her claims. Its very existence puts the lie to the idea that there is no Afro-American art. The uniquely black voices behind the cinematic juggernauts like 12 Years a Slave clearly demonstrates that black cinema is in no way inferior to its Eurocentric counterpart, regardless of how it measures up to their standards. And the influence these movies take from folk tales in the African tradition show us that there is no need for a Western Smith to refine black storytelling before it is palatable. Beyond the normalization of blackness, the proliferation of black filmmakers throughout Hollywood working on projects of every persuasion imaginable goes to show how they are able to create without their work being automatically subsumed by an enforcing Afro-American presence. Black cinema has clearly demonstrated that black artists are just as versatile and capable of racial consciousness or unconsciousness in their work as any artist of any other complexion.
Ain't I clean, bad machine, super cool, super mean, feeling good for the man, super fly, here I stand, secret stash, heavy bread, baddest bitches in the bed, I'm your pusher man.